Safety Division is the building official. We are here today to continue the policy development and adoption efforts for the city's first local electrification reach code. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. And it's very important to us in this process to harness community knowledge and form future policies and priorities. The vision for this engagement meeting today is to help create and prioritize policies and actions related to the electrification reach codes for new buildings. At a high level, today is focused on hearing your suggestions related to potential policy directions for the upcoming reach code cycle. The presentation should be available on our website as well. And with that, I'll now pass off the meeting to our facilitators today. Principal in charge from ID 360, Melanie Jacobson, and also the project manager from ID 360 is Leila Silver.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Tim. And hello, everyone, and welcome today to the meeting. My name is Melanie Jacobson, and I'm principal in charge for the project from ID 360. We also have Leila Silver on the line, who will be doing some of the technical slides later today. Next slide. So just a few housekeeping items before we begin the presentation today. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation, so please hold your questions until then, and we really want to get your feedback, so we'll have a Q&A time, and we've left a lot of time at the end for that. And if you'd like to submit your questions via the chat function in the presentation, please go ahead. You can also feel free to use your phone or tablet to scan the QR code on this slide to access the presentation materials and other supplemental resources on the city's Reach Code Development page. So that will be posted after the presentation today. So next slide, moving to the agenda for the community engagement meeting. We'd like to set the stage for today's meeting by sharing the city's commitment to sustainability initiatives and introduce some key priorities that are directly tied to reach codes and building electrification. Before we present the electrification reach code policy and discussion, we'd like to provide a brief background on reach codes. We'll then dive into an introduction to electrification to lay the foundation of the reach code policy approach that we will be reviewing today. We'd also like to highlight some of the changes on the horizon for the 2022 building code cycle, which will become effective January 1st, specifically for the California Energy Code, because reach codes go a step beyond the energy code, so it's important to understand where we're starting from. And then after that, we'll focus on the statewide reach code program and then we'll review some of the activities that are happening at the state level right now, which will influence what's happening at the local level. After that, we'll move into our Q&A discussion portion of the meeting, and then we'll wrap up with next steps that the city is taking. Next slide. So the objective for today. So the objective of our engagement meeting today is to really provide an educational background on energy reach codes, what they are, what kind of projects they affect, and then we'll review the energy reach code adoption process that's currently the city's undergoing right now. And then really, we want to respond to your questions and comments regarding the local energy reach code approach that the city is considering. And then lastly, we'll share the next steps that the city will be taking for the reach code policy. So now I'm going to pass it to Leila Silver, who's going to dive into the sustainability initiatives that the city is taking now.
Thanks, Melanie. Good morning, everyone. So we just wanted to kind of share a little bit of where the city has been, is going, to kind of lay down the foundation for our conversation today on these reach codes. So the city continues to remain a regional leader in its commitment to sustainability. Back in 2007, the city signed on to the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. And in 2017, the city joined the mayor's National Climate Action Agenda. Furthermore, in 2009, the city adopted a green building program to address climate change through smart green building practices for new construction projects, new additions, as well as major renovation projects. Now, phase one of the city's REACH code efforts actually went into effect back in 2021, which introduced some green building REACH code measures that really addressed areas in light pollution reduction, water use, construction waste reduction, shower facilities for bike parking, as well as defensible space in wildland urban interface areas. Also on this note, Culver City has joined the Clean Power Alliance, a community choice aggregation or CCA that was formed to deliver power generated by renewable sources. And the city also maintains a platinum level leadership in Southern California Edison's Energy Leadership Partnership mode, and has been reducing energy consumption by over 28% since the year 2006. Now, some folks on this call may know that, in the realm of climate change, a big focus is on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So a big driver of all of these sustainability initiatives, as well as this REACH code policy that we're going to be talking about today, all aims to support climate change action and this effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So now we're going to get into some background details on REACH codes. So globally and domestically, especially here in California, our communities are experiencing rapidly changing economics and policies related to climate action and implementation. Now, the reality of climate change impacts here in California have really become more and more intense year after year as we start to experience more extreme weather conditions, wildfires, coastal erosion, and sea level rise. So because of this, recent national and state level policies have really shifted the role in local governments in mitigating the effects of climate change. Now, we don't have time today to cover all of the climate action related legislation that's going on, but from President Biden calling for a government-wide approach to climate change down to the executive orders that have been issued here in California, such as carbon neutrality by 2045 and 100% of in-state sales of new passenger cars and trucks to be zero emission by 2035. It's safe to say that climate change policy is here to stay. And due to the evolving regulatory efforts and climate preservation occurring at all these different levels of government, California jurisdictions are adopting what is known as local building electrification REACH codes in support of these climate goals. So one of the first questions to answer is why REACH codes? Well, there are numerous reasons why California jurisdictions are exploring and adopting REACH codes. So at their heart, REACH codes really support local policy goals that might live in sustainability implementation plans or climate action adoption plans. Now, there are numerous benefits that are attributed to local REACH codes as well, which include, of course, savings on energy. And depending on the REACH code, it can also extend to money saved over time related to operations and utility costs. REACH codes also contribute, as we talked about previously, to efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, pretty much through design that considers efficiency and fuel types. Now, many cities have climate action plans or sustainability initiatives that include strategies to promote increasing energy efficiency in residential and non-residential buildings. And Culver City, is not alone in this effort. So there are many strategies that are out there right now that aim to increase incentives, as well as bolster policy measures that really aim at building electrification. And most of these plans, whether it's a climate action plan or a sustainability initiative, all include strategies to decrease greenhouse gas emissions through also increasing opportunities to use clean energy, such as participation through a CCA like the Clean Power Alliance. So typically, when you have clean energy available for a building that is also more efficient, it really skyrockets the decarbonization efforts and positive outcomes that come out of those type of measures being coupled together. Now, the second question that we're here to also look at today is, what is a REACH code? So REACH codes adopted locally will vary by jurisdiction, as every city or town is unique, but there are some basic fundamentals of REACH codes that have remained unchanged depending on the type of REACH code. So the statewide code, some folks on this call might be familiar, is updated every 3 years. The 2022 code cycle will take effect on January 1st, 2023. We are currently under the 2019 code cycle. And REACH codes can be amendments to various parts of the building code, but they focus primarily on the California Energy Code, or Title 24, Part 6, or the Green Building Code, also known as Cal Green, or Title 24, Part 11. Now, all REACH codes are voluntary codes that a jurisdiction locally adopts. It, in essence, reaches beyond the baseline California state code requirements. So it basically means that these REACH code ordinances that are adopted by local governments will require something in addition to the requirements of the state's building code. Now, energy REACH codes do have some fundamentals behind it. They are based on local prototypes that are built within the California Energy Commission's, or CEC, approved energy modeling software. They also go hand in hand with cost effectiveness studies that outline modeling assumptions as well as results, because cost effectiveness is a key driver to energy REACH codes. And then furthermore, REACH codes must not preempt any federal appliance efficiency standards. So they can't go above what is the current standard federally for appliance regulations. Now, the slide that you're seeing here is just outlining the typical REACH code process and the flow of activities related to development and then ultimately implementation. So most policies originate on this left-hand side with staff meetings to really hone in on priorities, identify goals, and kind of discuss parameters and some options to potentially explore. Then, parallel to this, the local stakeholder input and public process will happen as the code is being developed. And the city has been active with the engagement process for this REACH code topic in particular. Now, on a statewide level, the cost effectiveness studies that I mentioned in the previous slide are also happening in the background to support these REACH codes that will eventually go into effect. So the cost effectiveness studies, along with local stakeholder input and community input through the public engagement meetings, all tie into the development of the REACH code that staff will put together to bring to present to council ultimately for comments and then ultimately approval. After that, there are some regulatory processes in place where the REACH code has to be submitted for approval by statewide agencies, and then ultimately is filed with the Building Standards Commission to go into effect on its anticipated target effective date. Now for the city, the goal and the vision for the REACH code is to tie into the building code for the 2022 code cycle, which would have that target effective date of January 1st, 2023. So now that we've reviewed what REACH codes are, we'd like to just take the next handful of slides to introduce some concepts around building electrification, as this relates to the type of local energy REACH code that the city will be considering. So, what is building electrification? It might sound complex, but it is a pretty simple concept. Building electrification really means using electric appliances and equipment, such as induction cooktops, heat pump water heaters, heat pump heating and air ventilation systems in our homes and business establishments. Basically, electric appliances still perform the same job or service, heating and cooling our homes, providing hot water for our showers, cooking our food. However, they also bring about more benefits than gas-fueled appliances or systems. And we'll explore some of those benefits in the next slides. So many studies have found that building electrification can offer many financial, health, and environmental benefits. So kind of harkening back to like the three pillars of sustainability. Electric appliances are found to be better for indoor air quality, which of course is important for health reasons. There was a study done by the Rocky Mountain Institute that found that children growing up in homes with gas stoves may have an increased risk of developing asthma, for example. Now, switching to electric stoves, such as induction, can basically eliminate invisible pollutants that come from burning natural gas inside a home. Electric appliances such as heat pump water heaters and HVAC systems are also more energy efficient than their gas counterparts, which can help to save money and energy costs down the line. And then on top of that, electric appliances can be powered by clean energy, such as rooftop solar or clean power options, including carbon-free or renewable energy sources provided by the electric utility or a CCA. Now, when compared to fossil fuels, the benefits of electrification really become even clearer. So, as we just talked about in the previous slide, electrification of the building stock and vehicles allows us to leverage carbon-free electricity, which is in line with the state's goal of going carbon neutral by 2045. Now, electrification is also found to be the lowest cost, lowest risk way to achieve a carbon-free source of energy. And it's something that cities and counties can take action on at this moment in time. On the other side, we talked about indoor air quality and how electrification of our appliances and systems in our house can also contribute to improved air quality, basically because we're not combusting fossil fuels in our homes. That contributes to nitrogen oxides, formaldehyde, and carbon monoxide risks by use of those particular types of end uses. And then furthermore, job creation has actually been demonstrated to be gained through electrification. There are studies through UMass and UCLA that show that the job losses that would happen as a result of moving to electrification far outweighs the jobs that would be gained. So there would be a great opportunity for increasing the workforce in the trades around building electrification. In California, Governor Newsom's recently proposed budget earlier this year included a $65 million proposal for displaced oil and gas workers, which include well capping trading and funding for early retirement. So all of this is really being planned and in consideration at the state level to really support the efforts on the ground that are happening at the local level. So, because the purpose here is to electrify, we also need to understand where California's current gas usage is. So this slide is just kind of showing a snapshot of this. So predominantly in water heating and space heating for both residential and non-residential building stocks is what we see in terms of the highest use for gas. In some non-residential buildings, there are process uses of natural gas, which is under the miscellaneous section of the chart on the right-hand side. And the proposed REACH code initiative that we're talking about today focuses on residential and non-residential new construction end uses and electrifying those end uses in particular. And as you can see here, space heating and water heating really remain the biggest consumption users for both res and non-res building types. Luckily, all electric buildings are already the majority of new construction homes built nationally. So what we're seeing is that 60% of new construction homes in the United States actually use electric space heating. Right now, at this time, only 40% of that 60% is driven by use of heat pumps, but we will expect that to rise, in particular here in California, when we start talking about how the energy code is changing for the next building code cycle. 55% already use electric water heating, 62% already use electric cooking nationally, and furthermore, 75% of homes nationally for new construction already are using electric clothes drying. So this slide is really to just highlight that we have the technology, appliances, and the trade knowledge to really continue and really support this trend growing moving forward. Now this slide is just showing what some of these appliances and systems look like for residential and commercial building types. So on the space heating side of things, what you're seeing are residential and commercial heat pumps. Now, a heat pump is basically a reversible air conditioner. If you think about an AC cools the air inside of your house and dumps the heat outside. If you basically add a reversing valve to a refrigerant line, then it cools the outside air and brings the heat inside. So that's what a heat pump does at its core. Now, this technology is pretty pervasive and cost neutral compared to air conditioning, and has found to be true for most residential and commercial applications. Now, there are also heat pumps for water heating for both residential and commercial. And then on the cooking side, the preferred method would be induction cooking. We're not talking about the really old school coil stoves. Some folks here may be familiar with what I'm describing, but we're really talking about induction cooking, which is a pretty interesting technology because the technology itself actually induces a current in the cookware, which you could use stainless steel or cast iron on, and makes the cookware hot. So you might notice that in this picture over here, the chocolate bar is melted on the pan because the pan is hot, but the chocolate on the stove itself is not melted because that induction flow is not happening directly to the chocolate. It is only to the stainless steel pan that is pictured. Commercial applications for induction do exist as well. Induction stoves in commercial kitchens or even catering have been found to not produce a lot of waste heat and can require actually a smaller vent or no vent in terms of infrastructure that's required. And then lastly, there's clothes drying. So there is heat pump technology available here as well for clothes drying. And then for larger industrial clothes dryers that don't, the heat pump technology isn't quite there yet. Right now, it's an electric resistance technology. However, the industry is really moving towards, tackling that area in terms of the technology that's on the market and specifically for industrial clothes drying applications. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is equipment efficiency. So this becomes true especially when comparing electric appliances to natural gas appliances. So right now, the efficiency of our gas appliances is an average 80%. If you have an existing storage tank water heater in your home, this is probably closer to 60% efficient. With the newest condensing hot water heaters, maybe getting around 90 to 95% efficiency. Now, compared to a heat pump, the heat pump is actually 350% more efficient. You could be thinking, how can this be? But it's pretty much because heat pumps move heat to one place to another. It doesn't combust to generate heat. So because it's moving heat, kind of like a refrigerator, this makes up a big portion of the cost disparity that we have between relatively lower gas rates and relatively higher electric rates. Now, resistance and induction technology, the max efficiency is about 1 for cooking and for high intensity industrial processes. So now that we've laid the foundation of what a reach code is, what building electrification is, we'd now like to present an overview of the electrification reach codes. So some folks on the call today might be aware that there are numerous California jurisdictions that have adopted or are exploring the potential to adopt reach codes. In fact, a little over 54 California jurisdictions under the 2019 code cycle actually adopted some form of a local energy or electrification reach code. And before this December 2021 date, there were over 50 or so jurisdictions that were considering reach codes for the 2019 code cycle, but as well as looking to the 2022 code cycle. Now, there are a variety of policy approaches to reach codes. Some kind of focus on all electric design for whole buildings. Some look at all electric end uses for specific systems. There's also something called the electric preferred option that really incentivizes electrification, but does allow for a mixed fuel approach. And then, of course, electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well is a green building related reach code that many jurisdictions, including Culver City, have led the way in terms of requiring requirements that go above and beyond the green building statewide standards. Now, this slide is just showing some of Culver City's neighbors that have committed to a reach code policy, whether it was in the 2019 code cycle or looking forward to the upcoming code cycle. Well, this includes, of course, Santa Monica, who in 2019 had an electric preferred type of ordinance and is looking at all electric new construction across the board for the 2022 code cycle. They also have certain requirements for PV as well as electric vehicles. West Hollywood also has reach code measures around requiring PV or solar PV, as well as cool roofs. Ojai does require all electric design for new construction for both residential and non-residential. The County of Los Angeles has a cool roofs related reach code measure. And then the City of LA most recently, their city council voted to also go all electric and prohibit most gas appliances in new construction. So this is just to kind of give a snapshot that there are things happening regionally to align with the state's goals, but also each of these cities have their own climate action or sustainability goals themselves. And reach codes are really becoming the driver and mechanism to propel those goals even further. So before we share the Reach Code initiative activities that are happening at the state level, we've put together just a slide to highlight some of the changes that are happening to the 2022 California Energy Code to really, on one hand, understand where the state code is headed, and two, it will really give the foundational kind of launch point for where these reach codes will be picking up off of this particular statewide code. So I mentioned earlier, right now, the current code in effect is the 2019 California Energy Code. Now, the 2022 code that's upcoming does differ from the current code in a handful of ways, particularly when it comes to new construction. So for both residential and non-residential, the CEC has made heat pumps the prescriptive baseline and establishes energy budgets based on heat pumps for space or water heating, basically in an effort to encourage builders to install heat pumps over gas-fueled HVAC units. So this basically means that the heat pumps set the project's energy budget for space heating or water heating in certain climate zones within the actual energy model. And the energy models are used for compliance purposes. Now, under the 2022 code, it is now a performance credit in the energy model for all electric design buildings. This is a definite change from the 2019 code cycle, and it pretty much makes the state's energy code electric preferred because of this performance credit. Now, on the residential side of things, one change for new construction is that pre-wiring or electric readiness is now required for gas appliances. So the code will now require new homes to be electric ready with a dedicated 240-volt outlet and space with plumbing for water heaters. So electric appliances can eventually replace any installed gas appliances in that new home. And this is all to facilitate future installation of electric appliances. Now, another thing coming down for res is higher ventilation rates for gas stoves will also be required. So the 2022 code actually increases the minimum kitchen ventilation requirements so that fans over cooktops have higher airflow to capture efficiency, to better exhaust pollution from gas cooking and improve indoor air quality. And then furthermore, energy storage readiness is also required for new residential homes. So this will look like panel capacity reserved, as well as physical space for that particular measure related to energy storage systems. On the non-residential side, most building types already have the heating type end uses for space heating and water heating as an electric system within the energy model. So it's not a huge change. For some projects that do, work within the energy model. But one of the biggest changes for non-residential buildings is the requirement of solar PV to be installed, as well as prescriptive battery storage requirements for select occupancy types. So this extends to office buildings, new retail and grocery store buildings, new restaurants, new schools as well, will all be required to have solar PV installed, as well as some level of battery storage with the building. Additionally, the 2022 Energy Code also improves efficiency standards for the building envelope, various internal systems, and also takes a focus on grid integration equipment, such as demand responsive controls to really help buoy grid stability during high peak uses. So this is where the state is moving. And as you can see, a lot of things are moving towards the realm of electrification, solar PV and battery to increase resiliency. And this really sets our stage for the REACH codes that we'll be talking about in the next couple of slides. So before we look at the pathways, we want to share a little bit about the statewide REACH code initiative, which provides the cost effectiveness studies as well as the model REACH codes for all jurisdictions in the state of California. The statewide codes and program standard is implemented through the state's IOUs, and it responds directly to California's policies to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, I will say cost effectiveness is a very robust topic, and it has very different subject matter areas, and there's many different industry experts that are involved with the cost effectiveness studies. Today, we're only going to be going over some brief high-level aspects of the statewide cost effectiveness analyses and how it is applied to the REACH code policy scenarios. So first, just starting with some timeline updates related to the statewide efforts, in particular, the cost effectiveness research and analysis and the model ordinance language, since there may be some folks on this call who are really interested in knowing more about the cost effectiveness analyses or taking a peek at those studies for some light reading. The preliminary cost effectiveness results for new single family, new multifamily, and new commercial buildings are published now. The final results are anticipated to be available at some point by the end of this month. So once those results are published, that will really kind of hit another milestone that will allow the city to continue moving forward with developing the local electrification reach code. And then there are some additional cost effectiveness studies that are coming soon as well. In particular, a study that looks at electric pool heating, since this did come up a lot during the 2019 code cycle, as well as accessory dwelling units or ADUs to really look at the cost effectiveness on an ADU scale in particular. Now, this slide, as I mentioned, we're just going to briefly touch on the cost effectiveness studies. But in essence, the cost effectiveness studies are required for any local amendments to the California Energy Code. There are two metrics or methodologies that the study uses to demonstrate cost effectiveness. One is called on bill, which is the individual consumer approach and is looking at the local utility rates to justify cost effectiveness. The second metric is known as time dependent valuation, or TDV, which is a different approach to energy that looks at the societal impact to energy and greenhouse gas emissions. And TDV is what is actually used in the California Energy Code. Now, jurisdictions, so including Culver City, will determine which methodology to use to justify cost effectiveness. Now, again, as I mentioned previously, the REACH codes may not preempt federal appliance standards. And what the cost effectiveness studies do is they outline a bunch of measures that are based and rooted in different climate zones. For example, the state of California has 16 different climate zones. So it is basically analyzing situations and different energy efficiency measures in all of these climate zones. And all of those measures are then assembled into packages, such as all electric or mixed fuel with PV, or all electric with PV and battery. And the cost effectiveness analysis looks at those packages in particular. So if any of those packages are found to be cost effective in that climate zone, then the jurisdiction has the authority to implement and adopt that REACH code approach, in particular if it relates to an amendment to the California Energy Code. So the cost effectiveness studies and the initiatives that are happening at the state level with REACH codes will support some of the REACH code pathways that are available for jurisdictions to adopt. And I want to first preface the possible REACH code pathways with the main triggers and the building types that the city is currently considering for the local electrification REACH code. So the main trigger is simply new construction. So this means that existing buildings, including addition and alteration construction projects, will not be subject to the local electrification REACH code requirements. Now, there are certain building types that the city is looking at to include, such as new residential single family buildings, as well as new detached accessory dwelling units, new multifamily buildings, as well as different occupancy types under the non-residential umbrella, which include hotels, offices, new retails, and new restaurants. And all of the cost effectiveness studies that we were just looking at in the previous slide all are aimed at these building types in particular and supporting the cost effectiveness of these different types of occupancies for the REACH codes. Now, excluded from this typically are our H or I occupancy types in addition to existing buildings. So this would include things like hospitals or institutional related buildings. All right. Now, the table on this slide will be a big part of the discussion today. So we'd like to stress again that the REACH code policies are aimed at new construction only and will not impact existing buildings. So I'm going to break down this table kind of column by column, and we'll look at these options and approaches together. But basically what's on this table are the REACH code approaches or pathways that are supported by the statewide REACH code initiative. And these would be the pathways that the city can consider for adoption. Now, Culver City is looking at the all-electric related pathways per council's direction and in line with the city's sustainability initiatives. Some folks here may have been a part of some of the engagement meetings that were happening a couple of years ago, and electrification and all-electric buildings was really a topic point for those meetings. So starting over with these approaches on a high level, there are kind of four main approaches: electric only, efficiency, electric preferred, and electric only plus efficiency. Now we're going to start on the left-hand side of this table and kind of work our way over together to the right side of the table. So the first two columns on this table, efficiency and electric preferred, outline approaches for all electric design and mixed fuel design buildings. So our buildings that have natural gas in them. On the first hand, there's the efficiency pathway, and this pathway simply will require all new construction to exceed the minimum energy code requirements set forth by the California Energy Code. And it is done by amending the statewide energy code. And under this approach, you may have noticed that there is a preservation of choice because a building owner or developer could choose to either design as all electric or mixed fuel. However, both of those buildings would be subject to enhanced efficiency requirements. Now, the second option under here is electric preferred. Now, this approach only requires mixed fuel buildings to exceed the minimum energy code and aims to increase the incentive of going all electric. So under this approach, only buildings that are designed with natural gas would have to meet enhanced efficiency requirements above the energy code, while all electric buildings would not be subject to any enhanced efficiency requirements. They would just need to meet baseline California Energy Code standards, and of course, they would be all electric design throughout the entire building. The next option here in our electric only area is an amendment through the California Green Building Standards Code. And it simply just requires that all new construction is electric only. So under this approach, there's no room for mixed fuel buildings, but I will say that there are some exemptions and exceptions that we'll take a look at that can be rolled into an all electric energy code. Now, similarly, under this electric only pathway, there's something called the natural gas moratorium. This is an alternative model for requiring electric only through a municipal code ordinance that broadly requires buildings to be constructed without any natural gas and really looks at no new gas infrastructure, including hookups or piping. This is a very different approach. It does not amend the building code. It typically looks at the health and safety code. There are some jurisdictions that have gone this route, such as Santa Cruz, Morgan Hill, Santa Barbara, Berkeley, and San Jose. But again, this is a very different approach compared to the electric-only Cal Green approach that we just touched on. And then the last option, which is the last column on this table, is called electric only plus efficiency. Now, this is kind of a combination of our electric only plus efficiency reach code because it pretty much requires that all new construction is electric only and also exceeds the minimum statewide code requirements under the California Energy Code. Now, the energy code amendments that are listed here, the pathways that amend the energy code will require CEC approval and have those cost effectiveness studies to really support those reach code pathways. But this is on a high level, the kind of 5 different approaches that the city has available in order to enforce, adopt, and kind of develop a reach code that fits the needs of the city and also addresses any concerns from the community. So in addition to getting your feedback today on the potential reach code pathways, the city would also like to hear about any exemptions to the reach code that the community is interested in. So this slide shows some of the possible residential exceptions that are available for electrification reach codes. So this includes things like permanently installed emergency backup power that could be used in times of for example, a public power safety shutoff or, a power outage. Also, there are some exemptions for multifamily residential building projects that have approved entitlements before the effective date to use fuel gas for water heating systems, for example, to not, set back any design or decisions that have been made for those particular types of projects. There are also things to consider in the realm of exemptions around swimming pools and spas, indoor and outdoor fireplaces that use natural gas, as well as water heating or space heating in accessory dwelling units. Outdoor barbecues is something that we have also seen come up with local reach codes. And typically, it is also common to require electric readiness in the event that gas end uses are allowed, which also stays aligned with the California Energy Code's electric readiness requirement for new residential construction. Now, it's also typical for all reach codes to include some sort of infeasibility guidelines to capture waivers for cost burdens or other technical infeasibilities. And then furthermore, the city can also consider exemptions on certain building occupancies, such as the H&I occupancies that we discussed previously, or exceptions by appliance type. Now, on the non-residential side of things, you'll likely notice that a lot of the exemptions for residential buildings applies to non-res as well, with a few different exceptions of note. So one is commercial kitchens located in a place of public accommodation are typical exemptions for new commercial construction. As well as hotels or motels that have 80 or more guest rooms. There can be an exemption for those type of projects to utilize fuel gas in on-site commercial clothes drying equipment in particular. And again, the infeasibility guidelines and some of these exemptions that we talked about for residential can be rolled into non-residential occupancy types as well. This would be at the discretion of the city. So before we open the floor to discussion on some of the reach code information that we just went through today, I know it was a lot of info that I just threw at you, but we'd like to share considerations and some permit data that help to inform the city's current electrification reach code strategy. So as part of the reach code policy development, the city took a look at some recent permit data. So the city issues approximately 35 new single-family residential building permits each year. And kind of on the horizon, there are some anticipated development projects in planning entitlement that might become subject to a local reach code in the event that it goes into effect on January 1st and impacts these type of building types. So there's a 150 plus room hotel in the pipeline, one new office building, a 4-unit condominium, as well as one mixed use building with 82 units and retail space on the first floor. Now, you might notice that the bulk of future projects in planning kind of are mixed use and commercial projects, and kind of shows that these types of buildings might be the most impacted with a local reach code, in addition to the new single family projects that the city typically issues permits for every year. So the next two slides outline some of the reach code policy considerations that the city is taking into account in this development process, and may be helpful to prompt some of the feedback that we're hoping to gain from you today. So in terms of the reach code adoption approach, we're really interested to hear, which approach kind of landed with you, or if you have any comments. So again, going back to that table that we were just looking at, everything ranging from the electric only approaches or the all electric reach code, the electric preferred, which allows for mixed fuel, as well as the efficiency or electric only plus efficiency reach code. And then on the other side of things, we are interested to hear if there are any applicable systems or appliances that anyone has concerns about, in particular around heat pump water heaters, the cooking appliances such as induction cooking, electric dryers, or heat pumps for HVAC systems. And then, of course, there are considerations being made to the types of buildings that are being impacted. We shared, what the city is currently looking at and how that aligns with the cost effectiveness studies. And we really want to hear about any exemptions that we went over today that might have spoken to you, or anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to suggest for the city to consider. So this community meeting is one of many engagement meetings that the city has hosted on the topic of reach codes. And since efforts began a couple of years ago, the city has received and responded to a handful of common questions and comments that were raised during the engagement process. So we just wanted to highlight a handful here before we open the floor, in case this might be a question that came to you during the meeting today. So of course, will my existing building be affected? No, the city is considering reach codes for new construction only at this time. And the city acknowledges that there, is significant effort and expense required to typically upgrade an existing electric service panel and wiring throughout an existing home, for example, when it comes to looking at building electrification for existing buildings. Now, another item that was brought up was electricity costs more per unit of energy than natural gas. So electrification may result in higher utility bills. The reach code, again, will not impact existing buildings. We're only looking at new construction, ground up projects. Furthermore, as discussed, since January 1st, 2020, all new homes are required to have on-site solar PV, and thereby result in either a net zero electric bill or a very small electric bill to cover any excess consumption. And starting on January 1st of next year, new non-residential buildings will also be required to install solar PV as well as battery. Another question that comes up, how would I cook my meals in a 100% electrified building during a power outage? And the city does acknowledge that electric appliances would be compromised in this scenario unless the building is equipped with solar PV or a backup battery system, or an electrical generator, or some type of permanently installed backup power. Now, since all new residential buildings require PV, electrical cooking appliances would only really be compromised at night or on days without sufficient sun exposure in this type of scenario. And it's also worth to note that most gas stoves now have an electric ignition and won't work during an outage. And this also goes for the ventilation equipment of gas stoves that are critical to indoor air quality during cooking. Another comment that comes up is electricity is not a clean power source. Offsite power generation produces pollution. And Culver City is proud to be supplied by a high proportion of renewable electrical energy. The city participates in the local CCA that delivers a percentage of power generated by renewable sources. And the state already, including SCE, is moving toward clean power direction in terms of supply. So we're really seeing this kind of happen on a statewide level as well. And lastly, questions about the target building categories that are most prevalent. So we just took a look at that permit data. Low-rise residential buildings account for most existing and new buildings in Culver City, including single-family residential buildings or apartment buildings up to 4 stories in height. And then a common question, will reach codes increase the cost of utilities as well? And so this is kind of where the cost effectiveness analyses will come into play to demonstrate that if there is any increased costs associated with implementation of a local reach code, the associated savings in energy costs would eventually result in cost recovery during the reasonable life expectancy of the building. So again, these reach codes at their heart are aimed at being cost effective. So with that, that is the end of the presentation and all the information that we wanted to share at this time today. And we would like to open up the floor for any questions or comments that you might have. I think there may be some folks who might have used the chat button, or I think you can raise your hand if you wanted to speak live on camera and get yourself unmuted.
Okay, I have Michael here. He has his hand raised. I'm going to unmute you right now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my name is Michael Rockmus. I'm a resident in Culver City. And thank you for doing this. I think the presentation was really informative. Some of it was a little bit, there's a lot of information, I'll say. But I definitely appreciate it. I'm excited that the city is doing this. I think it's a really good thing to be doing. My number one question, I guess, is about the new construction versus remodel type thing. So, for example, I have a neighbor and the house sold, and so it's completely gutted, but there's like a wall or two, there's like some framing there, and they're building a new house. Does that count as new construction under this definition?
I can take that one, Tim, if you'd like. This is Melanie. Yeah, so the statewide code has some very specific definitions on what new construction is, and that's a really great question, Michael. In terms of what is defined as new construction, the state really draws the line for an energy reach code. The state draws the line at using the modeling software. So the modeling software will request inputs of what is being done to that building, and it will either dictate it as new or it will dictate it as a remodel. So it really depends on the scope and what they're doing to that building. There are sometimes local definitions that speak to the difference between existing buildings and new construction, which maybe Tim, you could speak to those. But In terms of new, it's typically ground up construction, unless there's some local variance to that. So
Yeah,
if it
here
is
in Culver
considered,
City,
if it is,
Melanie, it would be more, yeah, ground up. We don't have a specific, ordinance or definition change.
yeah,
and
great. So then Michael, it would be considered, if it's not a complete tear down, then it would be considered a remodel.
And so in the stats that you provided where it was 35, is that 35 ground up then per year permits?
Yeah, that's over the last 5 years, we've averaged approximately like 35 ground up new single family residences.
Got it. Is there any possibility to expand it to include something like the example I talked about, where they've removed most of the walls, but they have still some of the framing of the building?
Sure. I mean, that's what we're here to discuss.
Okay.
So I mean, however, I mean, what if you feel on that, you bring it up and talk about it. Yeah, I like to focus, that it's cost effective, reasonably cost effective. So that would kind of come into play. I think a lot of those type buildings, they have existing infrastructure already there. So if it's there, then that cost has already been put into the site. But
Right. So you don't get the savings that you would get from a new ground up where you're avoiding gas piping altogether.
yeah, I'm not. That would be something that kind of is vetted through like a cost-effective studies, which I think some are coming down the line for existing buildings, but I don't know if really the industry's at that moment right now.
Okay. I guess the way I think about it is what's the cost effectiveness of putting in all electric appliances now versus putting them in the future. And so if the building is being gutted and they don't have any appliances in the building now, compared to, let's say, in 10 years swapping out, it seems like it would be very cost effective to have them do it now. But that's, I guess you're asking for our thoughts, and my thought would be, I want it to be as expansive a policy as possible in terms of like the buildings that applies to. So I would like it to include more of those types of, because I feel like they're more common. I don't know if you have stats on that, but just looking around my neighborhood, which is single family homes mostly, it seems fairly common that there's construction that's kind of that type of, it's not really ground up, construction.
Yeah, stat-wise, we have records. The records would more indicate remodel versus new construction, but not the level of detail of the extensiveness of that remodel.
Got it. I see.
Yeah, unless we opened up every plan and looked at it.
Can I ask one related question, which is for an ADU, if I have a house and it's single family house and I add an ADU, would that be considered new construction? How is that defined?
Sure. It's a great question. It would be defined as new construction, but how you would look at that is there could be, I don't know if we have that exemption slide, but that could be potentially an exemption if because there's already there's so many configurations of ADUs that it could be possibly to have a, an exemption because you might already have, the infrastructure.
Okay. Well, just for the record, I don't think it should be an exception. But yeah, thank you for explaining that.
Okay, we have David, he has his hand up, so I'll unmute you now. Go ahead, David.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. David Juarez, I'm with the California Restaurant Association. The electric preferred method really stood out to me. It really encourages electric appliances to be used, but it still allows for other energy choices to be used. As you guys know, in the restaurant business, in the restaurant industry, having the ability to cook with gas is really essential to certain restaurants, to char meats or vegetables, to cook Chinese food with wok. I mean, they need an open flame to do that. So I guess I'm asking or requesting for restaurants to be exempt from any all electric measures that the city will be looking at, just for those purposes. It would definitely de-incentivize restaurants from moving into the Culver City or any new commercial spaces because of that.
We have, I think, Joshua Torres in the chat. Joshua Torres says there are induction works. SC offers free demonstrations and rentals. And we had Malaysian and Chinese chefs at our food service technology center this past month. I do have Christian next. I'll unmute you now. Go ahead, Christian.
It's Christian Kienapfel. I'm a local resident here in Culver City, and I'm also a practicing architect. And I would like to thank you that you're looking into the electrification and efficiency of buildings, because buildings can be built with a much lower operational carbon footprint and embedded carbon footprint. We did our first all-electric building in 2018. I'm calling from it actually right now. It's an all-electric building. It's self-sustaining with 10 solar panels, and extra 6 solar panels are for an electric vehicle. Haven't paid the bill since I think we moved in 2018. The technology is there with heat pump, electric dryers, heat pump, heating and cooling, induction cooktops, and it works very well. And there's no reason not to do it here in Southern California, especially for me personally. To have an explosive gas in a building in earthquake country just did not make any sense to me. And especially for the new construction part of it, it's very simple to implement it, and it's a much safer part. You touched on the indoor air quality. As soon as you do indoor air quality monitoring, you see a huge difference in indoor pollutant inside the building. And we have monitored that over the years here, and it has a significant impact. In the same time, with the electrification only, so I would be supporting your looking into the electric only plus efficiency section actually. Because in order to really make an impact in the future, and every time we build a building, we build it for the next 50 to 100 years, we gotta, the efficiency first is to use the consumption and then supplement it. And the more efficient your building is, the least amount of solar PV you need, the smaller the battery you need in order to operate during a power outage or during a natural disaster, etc. So going into that direction is definitely something to look into it. And I think touching also on my previous speaker here regarding the cutoff lines, what is considered new construction and what is considered existing construction or a remodel, that is something I think to take a very close look into it. It sounds like it goes in the same direction, like with keeping or removing wood fireplaces. That's when you saw many years ago where we had just fireplaces remaining. And when AQMD restricted the use of wood fireplaces. So just the cutoff line is the 50% rule or the envelope work on it. But again, I'm in support for the electric only plus efficiency, and especially even going in high performance building, air tightness is the biggest aspect in high performance in our area. And the tighter the buildings are getting in the future, the more critical it is to remove any combustions from inside the building in order to provide indoor air quality for the occupants. And I think also ADUs, since they are considered rental units now, and it's a change of use from a garage storage unit to a residential occupied space, it would make sense to implement all electrification, and no exception would be needed for those parts. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. David, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to make a comment?
Oh, no, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Michael. And I'll unmute you. 1 second. Go ahead.
Thanks. I guess following up on Christian's comments, in terms of the electric only plus efficiency, which I think I would support as well, can you share, has there been thoughts about what that would mean in terms of the efficiency part? Like what additional requirements might be considered under that?
This is Melanie. I can take that one, Tim.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, basically what that means is it's two components. So the first one is that the building would have to be electric only, so there would be no new gas connection allowed. And then on top of that requirement, there would be a percent savings over the baseline required. So what that means is, so the way that the state code works is that every building gets what's called an energy budget, and of what they're allowed to use for energy use. And so what it would do is it would basically decrease the energy budget allowed. So you have to be more efficient than what the state requires for that particular building. And each building is custom. That's why the software that we mentioned is used, because it takes into account where that building is, how big it is, what type of building it will be used for. So that's basically what it means. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Sorry, I accidentally muted myself, or just thoughtlessly did it. So yes, I that helps. I think I would agree with Christian. I think that would be the best, just because it has the biggest impact on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions.
Christian, go ahead. I your hand is up also.
Yes, in terms of energy efficiency, I think it goes maybe a little bit beyond the electrification, but the most energy efficient standard for building in any building type in any climate zone is the so-called International Passive House Standard. That is the most restricted energy budget. And in order to be well on efficiency, the most critical part is what is the allowable energy performance per square foot or per your setting for that particular use of the building and how you can achieve it. Insulation is one thing. In our climate, we don't need much. Thermal bridging is a big topic. Exterior shading is a big topic because solar heat gain has a huge impact on there. But air tightness is the biggest performance factor in our climate zone here. And maybe on a different discussion, there might be a way to look into performance criteria of passive house to see how that could benefit the building in order to set the bar even higher in terms of performance, because buildings can be much more efficient than we are right now. For instance, the building we built here and certified, that was the first certified plus building in Southern California. We have an EUI of 8. And that is in comparison to a standard EUI for a single family house comparable of 35 to 40 in the greater Los Angeles area. And that's just a massive saving without any hit on comfort. It's the same comfort, the same performance of the building. It's just the gas mileage of the building if you compare it to a traditional vehicle. The building is just so much more efficient, and mostly it comes from from the air tightness of the building. And but that is something to look into it in terms of performance potentially on a next cycle, because we can build better, because we often build still our buildings like 100 years ago. So it's time to potentially look into higher performance. At the same time, this makes the building more comfortable, makes it more durable. Buildings don't heat so much up, the buildings don't cool off so fast, and the durability is and resilience of the building is just better in comparison to regular buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, any other feedback? We want to hear your questions or comments. If you haven't yet spoken, please do so with the hand raise. Okay, well, I think if there's no other comments or questions, we can move into the next step slide. Layla?
Okay.
Okay. Just holding for any other last questions, but if you have anything that comes to you, please let us.
It looks like we got 2 hands up. So Christian,
Okay.
a hand up first, and then we have Nancy Barba after.
All right.
I just would like to offer, since that building our building here is an all-electric building, it's built to the International Passive House standards, I happily share with you performance data, since it's a building located in Culver City, so it would be very representative for if the city would like to take a look at performance data on implementation data, and if that would be helpful for the process of decision making and finding to have a real world study in our backyard. I happily share any experiences from it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Nancy, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Nancy Barba, and I am the chair of the Planning Commission, though kind of the questions and the comments I want to share are my own and not reflective of the city or the Planning Commission. First, I wanted to say that this bringing the REACH code on for all electric new construction was kind of in the works for a couple of years. So really happy to see the city and staff and consultants kind of moving forward with this. So it's exciting to see this up for discussion and look forward to hearing community input. And my one type of question is this team or other teams anticipated to provide resources for different types of building developers to reference in completing all electric construction should this move forward? And I ask that because one of the callers, and forgive me, it's kind of tough for me to see the names and the attendee list. One of the callers had questions on, or questions or comments on all electric restaurant kitchens or commercial kitchens. And I think there's a lot of resources out there that would be great to give access to the community. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, Michael had a question. So you're unmuted, Michael. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So it was mentioned that there were some other reach codes that had been done for the 2019 code cycle in Culver City. And I'm wondering if those are all going to be continued for 2022 or what the process is around those.
Good question, Michael. Yeah, we're looking to continue those to the next code cycle as pretty much they were developed.
And is there could you share a link or somewhere where I can see those existing reach codes?
Those are all posted. It's all in the municipal code, 15.02, section I think 1000.
Okay. Is there like a page on the website that might have like a layman's chart, like explanation or anything, or is that just the best way is to try to look at them?
It's not specifically itemized on our website. It's just through the itemized in the municipal code.
Okay. Makes sense. And then I guess my last comment before the next steps is I saw the note from David in the chat about Pasadena's ordinance. I've seen Pasadena's ordinance. I think it's a little bit disappointing. It's not very strong. I think looking at that, but also looking at Santa Monica's proposed plan for 2023 would be a good comparison. I think they do have an exemption for restaurants, but they require electric readiness, which I think is a really smart way of doing it. It's a good compromise. And since we're so close to Santa Monica, it kind of makes sense to align if where we can, where it makes sense. So that's my last comment. Thank you very much again for hosting this.
Great. Okay, we don't have anyone hands up. Sorry.
Oh, and also just to respond to the previous question about compliance support. Yeah, we will. Our team will be working with the city to develop a compliance page to have resources to help applicants comply with the requirements and provide links to some of the statewide resources to help different building types respond to the requirements.
All right, fantastic. So let's just go ahead and take the last few minutes to go over some of the next steps that will be taking place. So the city has a couple more community meetings planned on this topic. But as a next step, of course, development of the local code based on the statewide model code language, as well as the cost effectiveness studies, as well as any community and industry feedback is going to be ongoing until the ordinance in draft form is written. Now, the state, as I mentioned previously, is planning to publish the final versions of the cost effectiveness studies by the end of this month. So that could be really coming any day now. With the goal to bring the proposed REACH code ordinance to City Council in October of this year. Which will then, as a domino effect, kind of kick off the state approval process in line, all aiming for local enforcement. at that target effective date of January 1st, 2023, which is when the 2022 California building code standards will take place. So this is just a high level summary of some of the items that will be happening in, in the next couple of months. The city has the Reach Code webpage that you'll be able to look back to for any new updates, as well as some of the resources, as well as just information on the local policy development process at this point in time. With that, that takes us out of our meeting today. We want to give everyone great thanks for taking the time out of your morning to participate in this discussion with us. And we have taken notes of all of the great comments and feedback that came out of the Q&A portion, and will be considered by staff as we start to move forward in the development process. So again, much thanks to taking time to be with us today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the Thursday afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Looks like all the attendees have signed out.
Not everybody yet.
Oh.
Let's see. You got them? Okay, well, okay, so there's chat. All right, they all signed out, yeah. So great meeting, guys. Wow, a lot of info. Exciting. And I'm glad we got a lot of people to participate. So
yes.
Great.
Yeah, that was great.
So for
Great,
my
and
part, I will update the website on the presentation with that QR code. We're going to do this again on Monday. I don't remember the time. You guys, let me open the web page. It's on there. Thanks, Lord.
Let's see. I think it's in the evening on Monday.
Monday is the evening one? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Electrification. So normally I will sign on half an hour before the meeting starts. So if we want to go through anything or just talk about anything before it starts, then, feel free to log on, 10 minutes, 15 minutes early or whatever you want to do. And we can just do a brief talk. And then, I don't know, Tim, are we going to do a follow-up? Do you want to schedule, maybe I'll send some alternative dates to follow up after the 31st to go over this? What's everybody's take on that?
We should, I think definitely we've got a lot of kind of behind the scenes things that we need to be, that we will be working on in terms of helping develop the direction here and and teeing things up to help make some decisions about the next steps. For sure. I do want to kind of add to what I was saying before about the recordings. So what we will do, so I just want to make sure that each one of these gets recorded for sure, because we'll go back and re-listen to them to make sure we get all the comments incorporated for, the policy direction and then also for the staff report. So we make sure to capture all of that. So is that possible? We can record them?
Yeah, well, I recorded it, so I can send you a link to the recording. I mean, I don't know if you can see it or.
Perfect.
Yeah, so as soon as I get that, I can forward that on to you.
Okay, fantastic. Great.
Awesome.
Great.
And Lisa, go ahead, Mel.
I was just going to ask when our next meeting was scheduled for.
So it is on Monday, the 29th. It's Monday the 29th. Yes, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
the meeting.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you mean
What
to
I'm-
meet
I'm-
together as a group?
Yeah, like a working meeting. I think
Oh.
that's the thing that we need to get scheduled still. So
Yeah,
I think the focus is to get through.
That's what I was trying to ask earlier. So, what's good for you, after Labor Day or?
Mm.
Okay,
Maybe
let's see.
that's
So
the
it
week
looks
of the
like
5th.
Yeah, the week of the 5th or the following week.
Yeah,
So we
I think
close
you guys.
that Friday also, so it's a short week for us. We only on 3 days that week.
Okay, and we need to get the packet for the September council meeting. The packet is due this Friday. Is that correct, Tim?
Some so like maybe a draft, and then we could work to get the 31st meeting responses in there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm supposed to have it in on the 29th, but it gives the next person like a week or so to work on it. So I could tighten that up a little bit. So we can at least get it has to be after the 31st. So I need that be worked, a draft finalized, probably beginning of the month, like early September.
Okay, got it. So if we gave you a draft of the staff report on Monday, end of day, would that work for your schedule? Or would you need it?
That works.
Right.
Monday? That would
okay.
work.
Yeah, that would. Yeah, we want to make sure that that's correct, and then we can, and then we've got and then we'll make sure we can get the Monday. Well, I guess it would be after the virtual meeting on Mondays in the evening, so it wouldn't include that data, but it will include the comments from the first meeting, so we can just leave kind of like some placeholder language for the second and third feedback meeting.
Exactly. And then,
okay,
when it comes in, depending on that direction, if it's the same or different, then it might alter a little bit, but just have the body, I think, there. I'm still working on the direction language for the motions. I think I gave you a working draft version of one that was really, it started as a template from the Bay Area, which is different than how we do our city council meetings. And then I was working on just the final staff report, and then for the first reading, and then with that template, then I was retooling it for the incentive. So it's like halfway into the incentive staff report on that.
Okay, so so we'll leave the motion section blank, and then you'll fill that in. Is that?
Yeah. I think it's close. It's just the two I think it's close. It's just I need to work on what exactly policy questions are we going to ask for our scoping for direction.
Okay, got it. Okay, so should we continue to work on the draft that you sent? Is that the most appropriate?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. We'll do that, and then
it kind of jumps around. I don't know why they put it together the way they did when it was first originally drafted, and it jumps around a little bit. I don't know if it's the best linear look, because it goes to approach and then it talks. I don't know. It just jumps around all over the place. So.
Okay.
But
can I
ask a question here? Can I ask a question here? So really, the first meeting is September 19th. We're going to do the findings and discussion, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so are you guys going to be doing the presentation to the council that night?
We can, yes. It's really however you want to do it. It's in our scope to do that presentation, similar to the format today. But any parts that you would like to take, and we're flexible.
Well,
it's
my suggestion. No, well, okay. So this is the way it works with City Council. I'm just going to be brief with you because this is normally this is my job. probably if you could keep the presentation down. I know it's going to be a stretch, so much information. If you somehow can bring your presentation down to maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
I do have a couple of council members who was extremely interested in the REACH codes. I'm going to reach out to them to see if they can also, at least listen in to one of the next two presentations, so that they're like sort of prepped for the council meeting.
Okay.
But
would it be a good idea, Lisa, also to have a backup shorter, like a abridged version even of that?
Yeah, that's why I asked them if they can just keep it to 10, 15 minutes. They're gonna
I know,
have
but
to,
I think like 10, 15, but also a backup, like a 5 minute, because I think that happened on our soft story where they just ran out of time.
No. I'll make sure city clerk knows this. This is
Okay.
what I do, Tim.
All right.
Remember, all the projects in Culver City, I work with Saul. I've done this time and time again. So it's important.
That's why you're here.
I know what
that's why you're here.
I know what the council's priority is. I know what the city manager's priority is. I'm trying to do the best possible way to present this to the council and for the public. And that's why I did so much outreach to get them there, Trust me, when we first did this, we did 9 hours of outreach and we didn't hardly have 2 or 3 people in a meeting. It was crazy. And then, but now we got a lot more interest. And Christian, the gentleman you spoke with, he did come to our meeting before. So I'd like to present it out there for the council that night. And yeah, if you can just abridge it to like 10, 15 minutes, I'll make sure city clerk knows. And I'll see if, you actually had 2 planning commissioners on the call today. And I'm trying to get the council to kind of at least listen in.
And I think
the actual meeting.
I think the individuals from this meeting will also show up to the council meeting, both of them.
And hopefully that'll be it. But we do a virtual city council meeting, so we'll have call-ins too. And it's good. We're just bringing our findings first, and then we can come back with the adoption. So,
Okay.
We're trying to give them as much information before we actually come for first reading for the ordinance or, amendment.
Yeah, got it. So we loud and clear, we'll make the presentation for the 9/19 meeting no longer than 10 minutes, and then we will work on the staff report.
You're okay for 15 minutes if that's what you need. Just let me know so I can let city clerk know.
It's probably 15 minutes, Lisa.
Okay.
Okay. Great. And then so you mentioned that this, are you going to prefer in-person support for that meeting or virtual support? Do you want us there in person or on the phone?
That's your call, Tim.
I think that one can be remote. I think the first reading though would be in person.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, great. Well, I think we have our direction. We'll get to work on these tasks, and then we'll follow up by email with any additional questions that we have.
Okay, great. Thank you. You guys did a great job.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay, talk to you soon. Take care.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.